Bing. Okay, so this is the first Autometrics maintainer check-in call. So welcome, everybody. Quick agenda for this meeting. Basically, we wanted to get everybody in the virtual room and talk through how things are going with the different implementations, get a little preview of some upcoming stuff. And then we have a bunch of like open questions that it seemed useful to just try to discuss a little to see if we could come to some conclusions or maybe just prioritize the next couple things. So maybe to kick it off, Mies, do you want to share? Are you ready to share? Okay, so maybe just as like a kind of exciting or hopefully exciting preview that we can share. Mies is going to share the Autometrics CLI that Benno and co have been working on, as well as a little Explorer UI meant to supplement like the kind of crappy Prometheus UI. As much as we love Prometheus, we don't love its native UI, and also to help out folks beyond just giving Grafana dashboards. So maybe you can start with there, and then we'll turn it over to doing a kind of quick check-in with where the different implementations are, and we can look at the Autometrics roadmap board, which I updated with the various things that are in flight and coming up next. Sound good? Awesome.
All right. Yeah, so as Evan pointed out, we've got sort of a new UI and a companion command line interface called AM. So, this is AM. You can just kick it off. You can
maybe make the font a little bigger.
Yeah. It will download Prometheus for you in the background, which you can show. Case. We have a system command with a prune. And then when I hit AM start, it will fetch Prometheus in the background, and then fire it up, which is cool. So the whole purpose of this is to make local development easier and more fun. And then the other thing it has is a web UI, an Explorer UI. I have a Python app, a fast API running in the background, which is getting scraped. And as you can see, it has a few functions, has a do something function, a read root function, and I can sort of see the metrics for these functions live. Well, this function does not have errors. So that is the new exciting thing that we're working on, and as such to make sort of local development easier. Things that we're thinking about probably will add is, of course, adding an SLO pane here and adding an alerts pane as well.
Yeah, so a lot of this fits into the theory behind Autometrics of like, if we know what the metrics are, we can build useful visualizations and debugging tools on top of that. So this is kind of in that vein. Yeah. Do you guys have any reaction? Would love to hear what you think.
Yeah, it looks cool. Is it something you can connect then like to the live production data, or is this mainly for when you're doing debugging and stuff?
You can definitely so add an environment, and you could connect this to production as well. I will say, yeah, I think it's most useful for a sort of local while you're in development type of workflow. But yeah, for the moment. More to come for production later.
Very cool. Also cool how quick you're able to make it look nicer than the Prometheus built-in UI.
Thank you. Yeah, the other thing that I'd be curious to get some feedback on is, well, one idea that we have, obviously, I'm running some kind of generate traffic script in the background to actually fill up these charts. So we're thinking of being able to sort of seed Prometheus with, for instance, spiky traffic or slow traffic or erroring traffic, such that you have a little bit of an idea around, hey, what's sort of the shape of the metrics? What can I expect if things go wrong? And that might feed into maybe, defining your, like when you're in development, defining your first SLOs, and, what does it look like when an alert goes off? And this sort of fits into the model of like testing your alerts. So curious to get some thoughts if you have any on that as well.
Yeah, maybe a little bit open-ended for me, but I really like the idea of seeding it with some data, because one of the things that's been very painful is having to spin up Docker, spin up Prometheus, spin up an application, spin up a debug version of the IDE, and then go to a URL and start pinging it a million times just to test. So anything that can speed up that development flow would be massively helpful.
Nice.
Yeah, and I vote for the seed data as well as for other consumers, because one thing, personally, I just like to see examples. No matter how much I read for a document, it's so much easier to just be like, oh, this is what it really looks like. I don't know if that's just a me thing, but it's just quicker. So if there were some of those where people could just say like, oh, what does it actually look like? And they might know what to expect their data from those samples.
Great. Yeah, so we'll be releasing this this soon, so you can get your hands dirty. Okay.
Cool. Yeah, so that's coming up. So maybe we can just do a little kind of check in on where the different, like what are the things that are going on right now with the different implementations. I can also pull up the roadmap thing to, if that would be helpful. Yeah, maybe I'll just share my screen, but then we can do a little round robin of what's going on with the different implementations. So here we have our roadmap. Most of these I haven't started including the Java implementation, James, just because I think you had gotten a start on it, but it's not like fully up to spec yet. So maybe you want to talk first about kind of where the Java one is at, if you've had any chance recently to work on it or things like that.
Yeah, so I had a bit of a run at it there last Friday for a while. So I've implemented everything except caller. That's a little bit funky to do in Java because of all the aspect-oriented programming. So it's hard for me to tell which call in the stack was the real call and which call was the Spring dependency injection call. So there's no caller. I need to go back to the concurrent requesting. But other than that, the error rate, the latency, all that kind of stuff, that's finished. And I more or less, I've finished the IntelliJ plugin now, but the next step is to go through JetBrains' publishing process. And a small thing for that as well, actually, is so it's like a drop-down menu thing. So I need a copy of an icon for it.
Yeah, we can definitely get you that asset.
Yep,
cool.
That's pretty much it.
All right, Nathan, you want to mention where things are at with the C# one?
Yeah, haven't made a whole bunch of time recently. We have 51 downloads of the package, so I guess that's cool. Yeah, there's a little bit of use there. Next up are getting some concurrency tracking in there.
Yeah.
And then there was also a bug that I found when I was doing some testing where an SLO tag, if you do something really weird, it can get added twice, which is invalid in Prometheus. So just need to go fix that. But they're both marked in the the repo and hoping to get some time towards the end of this week to take a look at those. So
Nice. All right. I guess I can say where the Rust one is, it's weird because we're kind of treating the Rust one as the flagship thing, so it's feature complete with itself. The most recent thing to go in was the exemplar support, which I wrote a blog post about that will be releasing this week. My conclusion after having implemented it was that exemplars are actually kind of complicated to get. It's complicated to set up all the machinery around exemplars to actually make them really work. So I soured a little bit on that whole feature after having implemented it and writing a blog post. But whatever, it's in there now. But as a result, I wouldn't super duper prioritize adding exemplars in other implementations unless it's very easy to do. That's my personal take. And then the next stuff up are the things that we'll talk through afterwards. Yeah, maybe TypeScript, Python. Joe, folks want to comment?
Or I can jump on the TypeScript. I think the only major feature that is lacking for the feature completeness right now is the exemplar support. That one is kind of blocked by a bigger question where around supporting multiple underlying metrics collections libraries. So right now TypeScript only supports OpenTelemetry, but if we want to add exemplars are not yet implemented in the OpenTelemetry metrics SDK, so we need to figure out the interface and the whole story around how we can support multiple metrics collection in the package itself. There's an open discussion for it as well on GitHub. And then there's like a few housekeeping things, like the module acquirer is just because of the nature of the language a little hacky right now and has given us a little bit of a pain that I need to come back to fix. But other than that, yeah, it's for the backend use, it's pretty much there.
I can continue with Python version. There's been quite a lot of developments there. I added exemplars. I added the concurrency tracking, extended the build info with branch, and some more environment variables for SHA and branch. Anyway, half of these features don't work on OpenTelemetry, only on Prometheus. But otherwise, I think we'll release a new version soon. Oh, I also fixed a sync handling of a sync function.
And then, so piggybacking on that, the reason that so exemplars won't work with OpenTelemetry, same story as with the TypeScript plugin, but the build info and concurrency will work with OpenTelemetry once we get an upstream contribution merged. It's been approved. There's just an issue with the way that they translate up-down counters, what telemetry calls up-down counters, into gauges in Prometheus. There's literally a bug. Their translator did not match their spec, but with any luck, that should be in the next release of OpenTelemetry Python. And then we can fix our support in the library for those features.
Cool.
So yeah, I guess on the Go part, same story as a lot of people. So I got exemplar support working, but only when Prometheus is used as a collection metrics library, because OpenTelemetry doesn't support those exemplars. So but otherwise that works and it's fine. The main issues I have right now on the Go side, I mean, I guess there are three of them. Like, one is that the naming of the metrics isn't fully coherent. So sometimes it's a little weird to get the proper naming going inside, but I guess that's one point of discussion of today. Another point is that Another point. What's the other point? The other point, like, is that I got someone from Blockdaemon to use OpenTelemetry, to use Autometrics, and he had like a lot of feedback about how the README and the documentation is a little bit too hard to get into it. So I'm basically going through a huge glow up of the README right now, and like
Nice.
the third item, I think I forgot what it was. I think I forgot what it was. It's mostly about like being able to like handle detecting classes and having the class information properly like appearing within. Oh, I remember now. Like, so having the proper class appearing is an issue for me, but I guess that's another item for later. And the third and very last item actually is a very Go thing. Because we need to detect in Autometric whether a function returns an error or not to have the correct results for the function that you've called. And in Go, like the HTTP handler functions, so the stuff that handles the routes and the functions that are going to be automatricized the most, I think, like those aren't returning errors. Like you pass a pointer to the stuff that will eventually write the response, the HTTP response. And so we need to inspect the content of the response just before it's sent, before we can like actually figure out if it's an error or not. And the big hack around that is that I have to write middlewares for a bunch of HTTP libraries. And so I need to do a research phase to know like which HTTP libraries are important to have middlewares for, and then write those middlewares. So that's the big item that's going to come for Autometrics Go.
Cool. That sounds like a pain. And I would also say with supporting different libraries, that also feels like the type of thing that one can wait. Just wait for people to request specific things. Like if you have it working in one or two, if, you know, it's perfectly fine to say, okay, if anybody asks, we can add this other one later, but not going to do it right now.
I think maybe before we continue on the roadmap stuff, two other updates that could be interesting. Maybe Jaco, you want to speak about the VS Code extension?
Oh, yeah.
And then actually, Jerry, maybe you want to showcase the Diffmetrics feature as well.
Yeah.
Jaco, you want to go first?
Sure. So the VS Code extension has, I don't know if people have seen it, but it has like a different UI compared to what it originally had, which was showing just an individual graph. It now shows all like, what's that, 6 different graphs all at once. It has a time range that can be relative. So instead of like that it's fixed, you can set it to last 15 minutes or 5 minutes. I think 15 minutes is not a preset. So, but and then it just if you click on refresh, it will keep moving. So it uses the themes from VS Code. Yeah, there's quite a bit of stuff there. It's almost ready, except that there's an issue with the TypeScript integration. So the VS Code plugin modifies the TypeScript config and sort of injects the TypeScript plugin that we have for Autometrics. But there is an issue if you use TypeScript 5. Basically, it breaks with TypeScript 5. So I need to fix that.
Love breaking changes to programming languages.
Yeah.
New versions.
Rust support for that, like setting the envar. The PR is open, has been approved. So
Great.
I think it's basically ready for a new release, and I think that it's a pretty nice release.
Sweet.
And yeah, I mean, last time I tried to present my screen, it was kind of cursed. I didn't change like my browser setup right now, so I'm going to try once again, and hopefully it's going to work. But what we want to do, like it's a still screen, so as long as you see the GitHub command, that's fine. And are you seeing it?
No.
No.
Yeah, that's it's fully cursed. I don't really know how I can properly
I
share
think
that.
I can share.
I can demo though.
It's
Yeah,
the
that's
sample app that you were showing, right?
Yeah. The sample stuff is my testing ground, basically. So for like the purpose of having context, I guess. So we are working on that GitHub application that's currently it's a GitHub action that's going to comment and edit its own comment on all the PRs that are created on the repo with like all the relevant stats about like what happened to the PR regarding metrics. So in the summary, you get like a very quick summary that says like how many functions were fully removed, how many metrics were added, counting like the functions that have been autometricized and the ones that have lost their autometrization. And this infinity % is an issue that I'll fix later. But like, anyway, the point is that you know for each PR how many new functions are getting like their annotations and how much coverage like it changes in the whole PR that you get. So for the time being, the main point is that we are going to put everything inside the comments. The workflow also adds like the data that's been used to compute this as artifacts. So later we would be able to also have like a proper UI, like CodeCov or something, like to just fetch those artifacts from the repo and give you like proper insights about like the metrics that happen in the PR or in your repo as in general, basically. So yeah, I'm going to release like the V1 this afternoon or tomorrow morning, and it's mostly going to look like that with probably still a little less emojis, I guess.
So you're going to say more emojis. Needs more emojis, not less.
Looks good.
Yeah, I think these are all very, very exciting because it's just in that vein of like, if we can ideally make the libraries not super duper complicated, but then producing these standardized metrics and then can build all of these like surrounding tools, which hopefully can work across all the different languages. So you get a lot of power out of just autometricizing your stuff. So yeah. All right, on to the fun part, open questions and roadmap. So on the roadmap, on the in progress thing, I think all of the I just added this one to so we can kind of use this as like a feature board also. So James, you said that you were going to work on SLO support in Java or hadn't yet. Is that right?
I haven't touched SLOs.
Okay, great. Luckily, that's not a very difficult feature to add, I think. So cool. And then concurrency tracking. This is the state of play. Exposing the version info, the build info one. Yeah, the Python one is still outstanding.
It's not marked, I think, because it's not linked to PR.
Oh, is the PR merged?
PR should merge.
And you should have closed the issue. All right, cool. Okay, Python's done there, and then we.
I think I kept that issue open because the support was lacking in OpenTelemetry. I'm fairly certain that's why it's open.
And this is yet another thing that has made me fall out of love with OpenTelemetry. The state of their libraries is not amazing. Yeah, and then Nathan, you said the build, so you have the version but not the commit, right?
Yeah, and to get the commit, I wonder if we should just pick. So there's a couple ways users could get it with different external tools like modules and stuff. I wonder if we should just pick one and say, kind of like you were saying earlier, if you want another one, put in a recommendation as an issue, but this is the one we picked. I'll try and find a common one.
That's what I would suggest is like, if there's something that's especially easy for you to implement or you think you would use, just pick that one. And then that's the type of feature request that to me is like, I love getting that type of feature request because it means someone wants to use it. It's probably not too difficult to add the support for the other thing and you kind of have a direct thing. So very quick, I would, with a lot of things, just be like, yep, that's out of, not out of scope for now until someone asks for it, and then we can easily add it. So, yeah.
Cool.
Just on that as well,
Yeah.
this is done in Java. So
Oh, it's done in Java. Sweet. Okay. I need to start linking the issues from here, but that's great. Cool. And then exemplar support, it's in Rust and Python, not in TypeScript. Yes, in Go, right?
Yes, it is there in Go, like just for Prometheus, but it's there.
Okay. This, as I said, I would not, like, I think we put it in the spec as this is an optional feature, and I would not really recommend prioritizing implementing it personally. I don't know if anybody disagrees, feel free to.
I was going to agree with that. I'm using open telemetry libraries almost entirely, and if they don't support exemplars, it would just be.
All right. Yeah, so we'll just, I might mark this one as closed. And then, so it's in there as like an optional feature, and we can come back to it, but yeah, don't get too hung up on that. Okay, that's the in progress stuff. Now we get to new things. This one is just kind of, okay, it's a pain and it's not a pain. There's two renames that I think we should do. Basically, there was an open discussion about the differences between OpenTelemetry's naming conventions and Autometrics/Prometheus. And actually, nicely, OpenTelemetry resolved some of the issues that were compatibility issues. So they just smartly decided to use seconds instead of milliseconds, which was a nice thing. And then I brought up the whole count suffix thing that they had recommended, and they actually removed that recommendation as a result of that discussion. And so main thing, we should rename our main metric to be function.calls. And then when it's exported to Prometheus, we should make sure that it has, that it's called function calls total. The way that I would probably recommend doing that is, depending on whether the libraries we're using to export things to Prometheus automatically add that total or not, I would set up the metric accordingly, but we should aim such that it's always function calls total in Prometheus. But I think we'll keep the query for the moment. For all of the queries that are meant to run across the different implementations, we'll keep it using regular expressions so that it supports both options, and we'll probably leave that in for a while. So that's the direction that it's moving. And then the other thing that Jerry had brought up is including the Prometheus says that the units should be in the name. So our histogram should include the seconds suffix. Kind of annoying, but standards. So those are two things. I think for both, we'll make the changes first to the spec and the dashboard and alerting rules, and we'll do it in a way that's backwards compatible, using the regular expression matches, but just heads up. Any thoughts or questions or comments on this one?
So the total suffix is most of the time handled by the exporters.
It should be,
Yeah.
but the state of that is mixed.
If it's
Like, according to the spec, it should, but that doesn't mean that the libraries necessarily do it.
Okay.
And the other thing is that the total suffix is actually like mandatory, because when you have a Prometheus instance that is supposed to support exemplars and get exemplars from the data, Prometheus will bug out if the metric doesn't end in _ total in the name. So
Yeah, and that's because it's mandatory as part of the Autometrics specification, not part of the Prometheus text format. And so when you're using exemplars, you're using the Autometrics thing. And so that's why that bugs out, but yeah. Yay, standards. Next thing up, there was a good discussion that came out of the metric groups discussion about adding a service name metric. Yeah, that's something we should add. I don't know if anybody, this seems kind of straightforward, but.
Service name is something that's being loaded from an environment variable to identify the.
Either environment variable or, well, actually, you can read the spec. For there's a PR open for the spec. Please comment on that and we can merge that in and then get implementing that. I'm gonna try to do spec first development from now on, but no promises. Now we get into the fun stuff. The basic metric groups, I love that I don't have a actual thing here. So we had this really big discussion about metric groups with a lot of different ideas for different features, really fruitful discussion. Out of that, I proposed that we think of groups as specifically a kind of pre-SLO feature where you set up a group, functions can only be part of one group. You can have visualizations that show different groups, but they're really meant to be like groups of function by like HTTP handler or something like that, with the intention that you might set up a group and then later add an SLO to it so that you don't have to think about like what is the objective that I actually want in order to see some visualizations about it. I think we should, yeah, I can open up a PR to discuss that, but that's a little bit where I personally landed on that discussion. But there's a lot of like open threads there as well. I don't know if others have comments on this feature that they want to share now.
Not much. I mean, that seems fine to me. I also think that metric groups is just like, as Ivan was saying, like a less scary way to talk about SLOs. So I feel like just having metric groups as something that's like grouping all the functions, but without the thresholds is fine by me, basically.
Yeah, if these groups could be stored as labels,
Yeah.
wouldn't that be bad? That we are adding more?
Good question, and not really, because this should fit into the unless you change the group, this should fit into the category of labels that don't add cardinality, which we can write that up, point up more, but basically if you never have multiple values of a certain label for like a certain function, it doesn't actually increase the number of time series because there's no variability there. And so it's actually only the like variability that matters, not the additional labels within. I think there's like some slight storage overhead, but it's not the like multiple time series problem, but definitely something to write up. Thank you for pointing that out.
One question, and this is perhaps like already implementation oriented, like how would we then reconcile with if say we went ahead with adding groups, reconcile the existing SLO feature? And then
keep it the same. The SLO feature would stay the same. This would probably just be another label, but let's take this discussion to the either discussion board or the spec, because I think there are still some issues to think through before we implement it. So good thing we are discussing it and not implementing just yet. The next thing actually, this is like my least favorite type of spec discussion. But one of the things that we've been talking about is for tools like the AM CLI to automatically connect to an application, it would be kind of, or might be kind of nice if there was a default port that was used for exposing metrics, because then you could just sort of run your app with Autometrics in like some kind of default recommended way, and then run the AM CLI, and it would just like magically work. You don't have to specify a port or anything. A very annoying part about this is that we have to pick which port that is, and that's one of those like you have to pick something, and there's reasons for and against a lot of different ones, and ultimately it makes no difference at all. So that's a call. I would put out a call for please participate in that discussion, so that we can like pick something. But yeah, that's a thing that would be useful. I'm actually curious if folks have opinions. So with this one, I think the idea would be that we'd have an optional feature in the libraries for running a separate HTTP server, like little HTTP server, to bind it to whatever that port is that we pick. And then it would just listen on the like /metrics endpoint on that port. In Rust, I'd either implement it just using things out of the standard library or have it behind a different feature flag. I'm curious if folks have thoughts on how that might work or not work nicely in other languages.
So for C#, the metrics kind of work in a pub sub type model almost. They're written to the .NET metrics, and then listeners take them and publish them out. So it would be pretty easy there. I'd probably actually just make another package called whatever the name, default exporter, and all you do is install that package, and it would instantly subscribe and then publish on that port. So from C#, it should be pretty slick.
Cool.
Yeah, for Go, it's going to be part of the standard library, basically. Like the Prometheus client library, they do that as well. They have like a separate package that just exposes a route that could be used and like collects everything from the registry and exports everything on the correct port. So like I'm actually advising people to just reuse the stuff that comes with Prometheus, basically. And if really we want to have something like built-in or with one less import, we can add it. But I feel like just using the Prometheus HTTP handler is fine because it's like one import and one line, basically.
From the Java perspective, we're going a little bit funny because we're not using open telemetry. It's micrometer at the moment because that's already so tightly integrated into Spring and Java. But with that, we're just that means that they will already have a port and a path defined where all of their actuator metrics go. So it seems a little bit heavy to then like go and expose it on a second port and a second path.
And is that port normally the same or different than what the application itself is listening on?
It's usually the main application port.
One thing which I want to add as well is that if we are going to do this and have like a default port open, for example, if you're going to run two applications on your local development machine, it's going to fail because the port's already allocated. So I do think that's going to be a big issue.
Oh yeah, that's one feedback that I got from the Go user as well, because he had like an application that basically forks itself into multiple instances of itself to like have horizontal scaling, and basically that was an issue because as he statically wrote the port, then all new instances were conflicting on that new port. But I don't really know like if it's an architectural problem from the Go perspective or the application architecture or something else. But yeah, we need to consider the cases where some people might want to have multiple stuff running on the same port.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. So, I mean, this is I would say that this feature is kind of on the list as like, maybe we do it, maybe we don't. I think there's some benefit to, I mean, it could even be like more of like a recommendation we put in the docs or something. It just seems like if there's any port that the AMCLI could try connecting to by default, that would be kind of nice because it would improve that experience. But it's admittedly a little minor. So I don't know if maybe we want to discuss this more before saying we're definitely going to do it.
Yeah, I'll put this comment in the discussion.
Great. All right. Glad we're not starting on that just yet. We got more to discuss. Here's a fun one. So also because of the thinking about the developer, this is kind of born out of thinking about the initial developer experience of like you run the AMCLI, you get this little Explorer thing, and you see nothing because Prometheus has no information if you just start it.
Worse than nothing. But you don't see,
Yeah,
like similar to the Prometheus UI, you don't even see
right.
anything.
Okay, worse.
It's not even
yeah.
an empty chart. It's
Yeah.
nothing.
You see nothing. That's not super great. So this is like a little, I don't know. I think this will be more or less difficult depending on the programming language, but basically what we were thinking was trying to set the function call counters to 0 on startup. But there's a really big open question around like how easy that is to do in different programming languages. So I think people confirmed that in TypeScript and Python, it's really easy, which is nice because in dynamic languages, the decorators get run at startup. And so when they are run initially, they can just increment the counter by 0 and that should do it. In Rust, there's like a really crazy trick that I found that we can use to do this, which is fun for me because I at some point wrote a draft blog post called something like the dark magic behind the dark macro magic behind Autometrics RS, and then I didn't publish it because we took out some of that dark magic, and this would bring back the dark magic. So I'm only a little bit excited about that. So open question to Nathan, Jerry, and James about, do you have any idea how difficult / impossible it would be to start the counters off at 0?
I can't remember if it's in just a call called increment that I call, or if you actually pass a value. That's what I was trying to remember here quick. Because if it is just a if it is just an increment call, might kind of be out of luck there.
For what it's worth, in the Python implementation, I think we just increment by 0, and that creates the metric. Yeah.
In Go, I think it's going to be painful, but maybe possible. Like, I think the solution would be to try to get the Go generator to collect every function that it sees into an additional file that would then be compiled into a function that would be called in the main stuff. So that's probably the way to do it, but the main issue is that the generator basically is called for once per every single file that exists with the annotation, and that creates basically contention and concurrency problems because we want to collect all those different calls from different files into one single file somewhere, and that's going to be a problem to figure out where to put all those collected results. But yeah, like, it's probably possible, but it's probably very painful.
Yeah, and on the Java end of things, I'm pretty sure it's possible, but quite funky. Yeah, that's all I really have to say there.
Yeah. I quick did a search, and so the record on account for C# accepts a long at the beginning for the delta. Now I don't know if it's going to complain if I say the delta is 0, but it accepts something, so it will worth a try.
I was frankly surprised when it worked for us. Yeah, because you just think increment by 0. Okay.
Yeah. That's not a delta at all. That's
Yeah, credit to Jerry for pointing that out, because I was like, yeah, this is definitely not possible in this way. I was thinking of like crazy workarounds, like pretending to be the metrics thing at first, and like really bad stuff. And Jerry was like, you can just increment by 0.
Yeah, I also like the kind of I don't know, the initial evaluations here, which is like Go is like maybe possible but painful. Java, pretty sure it's possible but funky. We're getting like
Yeah.
adjectives to describe implementations are fun.
Oh yeah. Cool. Okay, so this feels like we need a little bit more research, but is seeming pretty doable. I would suggest that we kind of put this on the docket to go ahead and do, especially because this is something where it's okay if the different libraries work differently. And we can put this as like a kind of optional thing. Go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, actually, so I did, in the wake of reading something somewhere, I don't remember what. Okay, so as far as I know, rate has some special logic to handle missing data, or like to basically I'm wondering if initializing a counter at 0 will mess with some of the magic that Prometheus does under the hood when calculating numbers. This is very like my knowledge of internals is very little, but it seems like we are doing something different than what Prometheus would assume when calculating things. So I wanted to put that out there because I had that thought earlier or late last Friday afternoon.
Yeah, that was from the blog post from Evan that's not out yet, I guess.
Yeah.
But the point of that, the rate operator in PromQL is supposed to take the restarts into account by considering that when it sees a value that's less than the previous one, the new value is exactly the number of new events that happened since, like in that time interval.
Okay.
And theoretically, that shouldn't be an issue, like, or maybe it's enough by one error, and in the grand scheme of things, it's not too bad. But like, we need to test this out, because even if you get a restart and then someone calls it, that means that in the next scrape, instead of having no value or 0, instead of having no value or 1, you would get 0, and like that's some kind of edge case that may not work too well within PromQL code. So we need to check that out. But
all right, we will double check this before we get started implementing it.
Yeah, but I would say just to drive home like why this is kind of another reason this is important is like, well, yeah, with the errors, the thing that me showed in the beginning, like right now we can't really distinguish whether you've had 0 errors or whether like we've never actually seen that metric before. And so once you initialize at 0, you can like in the UI be like, hey, you literally haven't had any errors, versus like we can't find this because we can't scrape it.
Yeah. Okay, so this one's getting bumped up to the top, but we'll do some research and confirm with everyone before. We have 2 more on the list and 10 minutes left. I don't know if we want to prioritize these, but maybe we should just discuss them more in the discussion. But Jaco brought up a good point that our caller information right now actually is not providing enough information to uniquely identify the function that is calling it. And so we might want to change that so we have like caller function and caller module, if that's what we're using to uniquely identify functions. Yeah,
Like we could do it for sure. It's just that it can also become like an explosion of labels, because we also want to later use the module name, like the service name, to
Yeah.
uniquely identify a series. So we would need to also have like a color service, and we like same thing with the class or struct that we are going to talk about just after. So just need to think about that basically.
We're not propagating the Autometrics color over like surfaces, so we don't need the surface there necessarily.
not yet, but great feature idea.
Yes. It looks like we're ending up with tracing.
Yeah. You say that as if it's a bad thing. We'll discuss that another time. Yeah, but that would be the thing that right now we're not propagating it, and so you wouldn't need the service one, but you would need whatever combination of labels uniquely identifies some function metrics.
Yeah. I think this one would be hell in Java.
Okay.
To put it simply, there's too many auto-generated classes.
Mm.
You wouldn't be able to figure out which one is which.
Okay. Good to know. Maybe you could put that as a comment on that discussion thread so we can keep track of that, but that's great to surface.
Yeah, this is also not great in JavaScript because I mean, we would just reuse the function that we're using to get the module, but that bit is currently the flakiest in the implementation. And my inclination is to rely on as little on it as possible. Until there's a way to look up the module name in JavaScript natively.
It shouldn't be too difficult for C#. I mean, it's pretty strongly typed, so I think where I pull the calling function name, it's probably just part of a fully typed name.
Okay.
Would just be an extra label.
What else? We have Python. Python, what's the deal with this? Easy, not easy?
I don't know. I don't have I mean, yeah, like all of our Python maintainers are not necessarily.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can get some information by using inspect, but I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, in Go it should be free, that part. Like the color info is very easy to get in Go.
All right, cool. Good to know. And then the class or struct names being included in the metric labels. Basically, there's a question about should the class or struct name be a separate label or should it be included in the function or module labels? I think there's not enough consensus to really decide on doing that. So I would encourage everybody to participate in that discussion if you have any thoughts on it.
I would also like recommend bumping this a bit, as in if we are going to do this service and already like open everything to like new changes, we might as well just do them together.
Fair point. Okay, so then maybe call for very soon discussion about this one.
I think Autometrics Python already includes the class name in the module name. So that might be already kind of.
Yeah, this feels like one that's definitely going to be easy to implement in everything. We just need to make a decision on where we think it's most useful.
And I think for C#, I use the C# class as the module name since it's the class of the object. So might just be some clarity there to decide, but easy enough to change.
All right. Cool. Those are all the things. So basically to recap, we're going to start on the rename shortly. Probably right after this, I'll send the PR for the spec. Same thing with the service name changes. We're gonna get started on that. The setting function counters to 0, people should feel like we'll also do that one, but that one requires less coordination. The basic metric groups, exporting metrics on a default port and path, those require more discussion. So I think we'll kind of bump those to the bottom, and those are kind of additional features anyway. There's that. And then the caller info should include the module. I think we need a little more discussion on that because it depends a little bit, like if it's impossible or easy to get that info. And then the class names thing definitely need to like this. We need more opinions, I think, to come to a conclusion on what's the best approach there. So maybe everybody can try to weigh in on that one, and we'll try to get that also slated for inclusion in kind of the next release-ish. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. Anybody have any last things to add? We're remarkably right on time.
Great first call.
All right. Yeah, great first call. Thanks everybody for participating, and we'll talk more on the GitHub discussions and Discord.
Thanks, everyone.
Perfect. Thank you.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.